In this case, we're talking about improving the user experience and looking at different ways of organizing kind of complicated products for a manufacturer of brazing alloys. So basically, alloys that allow metals to join together. And they wanted to improve that user experience. They had some very complicated, very technical products, and they wanted to make sure that users could find them on their current site and were able to filter through those pages effectively. Really, their big question that we were faced with was, how is their experience compared to a current competitor experience? And if we're looking at making changes to that experience for products, should we incorporate any of the things the competitor is doing, or should we just look at optimizing their current website? And part of the reason this came up is because the websites were incredibly different in how they treated very, very similar products. For option one, we can see that the primary way of filtering through products here is by filtering. Like I just said, filtering, clicking boxes and filtering, that they had different ways of clicking on different items that they could filter through, and it would shorten down the list of available products based on those filters that were selected. Or they could type in a search to refine that result. On the other site, there were no filters at all, just a table where a lot of these things were listed out instead of in cards, and a search bar. And that was it. So we wanted to better understand, how are users interacting with these experiences when they're trying to do the same thing on these sites? And are there things that we can incorporate from either experience to make an optimal experience? Really, which is the easier one to use? So what user testing is we use an outside tool. There's a ton of different tools that you can use, but we run users through different tests or tasks on a site, and we watch how they complete them. So for example, if we want to see how someone downloads a PDF, how they access a PDF on the site, we will, through this tool, this online tool, say, user who is talking to today, go to this website and download this PDF. And sometimes we give them more context, sometimes we give them less context, depending on what it is that we're testing. We then have a video recording that we can take of that user completing that task without our intervention. These are all recorded through an online tool that we are not moderating typically. So users are completing them on their own time, and then we watch the video after the fact. So we can see that pure interaction without us biasing it at all. And then we often can ask them questions, see how they complete the task, and learn from what they did on the site to, see what worked and what didn't, and how we can best improve that experience. So for this, we narrowed it down to a pretty specific audience. We wanted to make sure we were targeting 5 users, which was the industry standard for this. Typically, we recommend 5 to 10 users for an average website. The users we got were between 25 to 59 years old, just based on what the tool gathered. Most of them were male. That is pretty equivalent with the industry that they're targeting. And we had narrowed it down so that they were working in a field related to the target audience they were trying to reach with their products in general. In terms of tasks we asked them to complete, we wanted them basically to compare finding similar products. So we looked for products that had very similar classifications, maybe slightly different branding, but the basic product at the end of the day was the same. And we said, find this product on option one, find this product on option two, watched how it worked, and then asked them to compare that experience. And we did that with a couple different products and a couple different ways of talking about those products. For example, if you were searching by certain classifications, if you were searching by use case, if you were searching by industry, how do those things change and differ if you're going with that kind of mindset in mind to these websites? We again watched the videos, watched how users completed the tasks, and within those videos, we also asked them to talk about their experience, talk about which option they preferred in each use case, talk about where they got hung up, and we use that to understand how the sites functioned. So how this worked out was that 3 out of the 5 users preferred option one, and they preferred the idea of kind of using those filters and how that site functioned, which was the site that we were originally starting with, and understanding how, to get to those products. We actually pulled this quote from one of them, which said that they prefer the website with the more functional filters, this one. The other one, you had to do it manually because they didn't have the option to actually click on filters. They preferred the way of selecting and filtering things down versus having to just search and scroll. Now, there were 2 users that felt a little differently. One did just prefer the other option because they don't like using filters. And the other one said that they were pretty equal because they just use search. And both sites had the option to search. And so as long as the search worked, they could do what they needed to do. So it was really interesting for us to watch how someone completed the same tasks on both sites with such different user experiences. And while we, learned that, some of them preferred this one, others preferred the other option, really the biggest takeaway for us looking at how they talked about that experience was that really the reason why option one came out the top is because it had variety, because you could do just the search or you could do the filters. Maybe we can make that search a little more prominent on the page so that users knew it was available, but it was, something that users could easily see that they could engage with in multiple different ways. And because preferences from these users who are interacting with the page changed, some of them liked filters, some of them like search, some of them just like to scroll down the page till they found what they were looking for. We needed to account for the different ways that somebody wanted to search, since there wasn't a consistent way that anybody was doing it. Not nobody, it wasn't that we were going in and seeing that everyone was using filters and nobody was using search. It was pretty mixed. And so we wanted to make sure that there was a variety of options for users when they got to that page to filter down to those products. So we wanted to make sure they had multiple options in how they wanted to search and sort through those results. Another thing that was really interesting is we could learn from some of the struggles that they had on the various sites. So, for example, on the option two site, there were a handful of users who didn't even see that there was a search available at all. That kind of search box, while it's there on the page, just didn't stand out to them. So, for us, it was a good sign that, okay, let's make sure that the search is prominent and make sure we don't just kind of hide it off to the side, that it's something that users can easily find on the page and that it kind of full width and takes precedence. The other thing that was fascinating with this one is that because it was in a table like this, users tried to click the headings to sort the table, like you would do kind of in Excel or a table with products you're looking at on a website in general. They thought that they could sort by the different headings, which doesn't work, at least not on this website. So it was a good signal to us that if we do end up putting something in a table like this, let's make sure that we can sort by those headings because users were just intuitively trying to do that. Sometimes without even realizing it, we would see them click on those headings and we want, that wasn't working for them. So that was an unexpected experience for them and kind of slowing them down in the process of getting to those products. The other thing that was fascinating is that users, when you set up these tasks, aren't always going to engage in the way that you would expect them to. So in this example, we gave them the full website. We brought them right to the product page we wanted them to use and said, find this product in these different ways. But some users went to the general site search that was at the very top of the page in the utility navigation. They didn't go to the product search that was really prominent on the page that we showed before. They went right up to the general site search and did a search for the product there. And analyze the results that way, which was not something that the team, when we were setting up these tasks, was expecting. But it makes complete sense if you think about how some people navigate a website. Sometimes you're going to get users who go right to the top navigation and click through the path until they get to where they're looking for. But there's just as many users who just go straight to site search, especially today in the kind of world of complicated websites that manufacturers have to deal with. Some people just don't want to dealing with navigation. They're going to go straight to search, the general site search, and just see what pops up. So this was a sign to us that, while we're focusing on these product pages, we got to think about this in a larger perspective of its overall impact on the site and make sure that the general site search was also up to par because that also impacted the way users were finding products. The other thing that is true of almost any type of micro UX research that you do is that you're often going to find more than what you went looking for. So in this case, while they were completing these tasks, they provided feedback on lots of things that we didn't even ask them about. There was feedback on the way that the cards looked for the products. There was feedback on the general website navigation, something we didn't even ask them to touch. We asked them just to stay on the page they were on, but they made comments on, I would think I would have to go here in the navigation. Some of them clicked onto the product detail pages. Again, not something we asked them to do, but they were providing feedback on that. They talked about the design. They talked about page layout comments. This is something that we see all of the time. Even when we're doing heat maps, like in the previous example, we'll see clicks on things that we weren't expecting to see clicks on, which might lead us down another rabbit hole of, well, why is that happening? What is the general reason someone's doing that on the site? And why are they on this page in the first place if they're looking for that content? So the thing to keep in mind is that, by doing this little micro research, you might also identify other areas that could be optimized as well. The cool thing about this is that none of these are major problems. You're likely kind of going in because maybe you've got an issue with one area of the site and you're trying to fix that. But it might give you better insight to your overall website performance, as well as it might help you identify other areas that you might want to dig into in the future to better improve that experience. The other thing to keep in mind is that with any of this research, and I've kind of hinted to this throughout this process, you always want to validate it with other types of data, especially with user research. You always want to validate it with other types of data because no one source of UX data is going to tell the full story. The best way to get the full and complete picture of what's going on your site is to look at it from multiple perspectives and see if they all align. Something that we did with all of these, but I would be remiss if I didn't bring that up because definitely want to make sure that you're validating that you've got the correct understanding.